All right, there we go. All right, well, at least you guys were seeing my words. You guys might not have heard the words, but you guys were seeing them. All right, yeah, sorry about that. I'm also going to move this up just a little bit because then if you guys are doing whatever. All right, there we go. There we go. All right. That's funny. That's a nice thing to come back to after like 2 weeks of not doing anything on stream. But we're talking about like getting the job, right? And what you need to do. And, I think you should find what you kind of want to do. Look, most of the time we just kind of fall into tech, right? Somebody sells us about this job, or somebody, right, tells us about this job, or somebody, or we go find a job and then we move up and then we get more and more responsibilities and roles. But there's also kind of looking for it, right? Like, hey, I do Linux and I want to do Linux, and that's what that's the life for me. So I'm going to do all the Linux that I can. So I want you guys to, think about some of the jobs and the tasks. So we were talking about learning Linux, right? And these were skills that we found right off of a job. And we can go look at jobs, right? We could pull more of these up, but we need to understand documentation. That's like an admin task. That has nothing to do with what type of admin or engineering you're doing. You have to be able to document your stuff. That's going to be true against Windows, Linux, storage. I don't care what you're doing. You need to document like the type of work you do, how you built something for a customer. I mean, these are things you need to know, right? But as an admin or an engineer, you also have to be good at documentation. So we talked about that a little bit. We talked a little bit about incident management. These are just kind of me reviewing some of this before we get into just the next part, which is going to be doing Linux, right? We need to know some troubleshooting, and there's a bunch of different methodologies. And what I thought about kind of showing you guys was where I would go to look at these. But these notes will also they'll also be up in the Discord, right? I always drop them in the notes channel. And then monitoring, we got to monitor our systems. We got to operate the running systems. So looking at the systems as they are and kind of what exists there. So that's kind of that's not operating systems. That's operating another way to say that is the running, right? Like just operating a system, like what's going on inside of a system, right? We need to understand, patching and updating a system, configuring it, hardening it, giving access controls, allowing people in or out, and these kind of things. So we're going to kind of touch all of these things. Automation, Ansible, Chef Puppet. I would say like Ansible is still for me king, but Terraform is big for automation. Any of your cloud SDKs and cloud command type stuff. And you know what? I mean, let's give a nod where PowerShell, right? That's not just some Windows technology. PowerShell powers all kinds of stuff up in the cloud. PowerShell can directly interact with your AWS, your Azure. I wouldn't sleep on PowerShell. And as a guy who mostly wrote professional Perl in my career, PowerShell was like an easy transition for me when I've used it because it looks a lot like things that and I know people probably think that's a little weird, but for me, like Perl, the structure of Perl worked really well when I did JavaScript stuff and when I did PowerShell stuff. And you might go, they're different. I realize there's all kinds of differences, but I'm just saying like the structure and the flow of them always felt very similar to me. So it worked well for me when I was doing a lot of PowerShell back in the day. I haven't done a lot of PowerShell in the last maybe 4 years or so, but I ran Windows teams as well, even though I'm a Linux guy. So anyway, so let's go do a little bit of labs. If anybody wants to do them with me, you guys can. These are free up on Killer Coda. I'm just going to run through the labs and then talk about these things and kind of here were the other things. You got to put together a resume. You got to be able to put the skills that you know how to do down onto something that hopefully fits in one page. You don't have to do one page. It's just you got to remember like the hiring managers. Well, first off, you got to get past the HR hurdles and all that stuff. So you have to have all these keywords and all this other stuff. If you guys want to see what resumes look like, we have people have been posting resumes for a long time in our Discord. And if you want to see what some of those look like kind of generalized, I can show you that. And then I always say lead with what's asked for in that job. Like Linux is a very generalized thing, but if you want to be a dev or a DevOps or an SRE or any of these other things that are kind of Linux adjacent, you need to change up your resume for each of your different things that you put in for. So there's that, and then you need to practice your interview skills. We have a few people who give interview practice. I think one of our guys, Zero Enormous, even offered to help with that. But I know for sure I've done it a lot, and Sending Grounds has done it. Um, and these are just people down on our Discord who have been doing this for a long time. Sending Grounds has probably done more interviews than I have, even, and I've given, many hundreds of interviews over my career. I'm always there for the technical stuff. That's what they always bring me in for. Join groups with similar interests. I tell you guys all the time, go get involved with this stuff. Find other people that talk like what you want. Listen to podcasts on the things that are interesting to you, that kind of stuff. All right, and then put in for the jobs. But let's do, I don't know, for today, I just thought we'd do some Linux, right? So here's the labs that I have. I have a whole bunch of other ones. I need to write a whole bunch more for the automation course, so I need to get back to that. But we're just gonna do some basic Linux labs today. Looking around in the system. There's a bunch of ways to dig deeper on these. We have all kinds of stuff up in our Discord for people that want to go play with that. But I'm just gonna mess around and do some I'm just gonna do some Linux today. So we're gonna start at lab 1. Lab 1's simple. Look around inside of a Linux system. So the system checking. I'm gonna drop it in both of our chats here. I don't see anybody chatting really. I just see Colchis on, but the way that I start all these looks kind of like this. By the way, if you've never seen Killer Coda, completely free site. You can just log in with some type of you could use federated access or whatever. So like if you have Google already or something like that, you can just connect right in, and they don't really even bug you. I mean, they do. If you click up here, they say, hey, you're only using 60 minutes, but we don't really need 60 minutes to go through this stuff. So you're a new system administrator company. You've been tasked with finding out information about a set of servers that has little or no documentation on it. Now, if you're new to the industry or you're trying to break into the industry, that's probably one of the most accurate things you're ever going to run into. People either don't or can't document things, right? They just don't want to or just won't. So there's that. And actually, hold on a second. I think I have too many things off. Give me a second here. Let me turn off my studio mode. Let me Twitch alert box. Hold on. Whoops. Don't want to do that. Hold on. Where'd that other thing go? I was literally clicked on it. Here we go. Nope. Nope. Quit being difficult. Hold on a second here. Move this back down so that looks more like what I want. All right, there we go. I'll put that over my head. Now if anybody follows or anything, it'll actually pop up. So, put that there. All right, good. I'm looking over at my my things, and somebody followed. Thank you for the follow, by the way. And it didn't pop up as a follow, so I didn't have that turned on. But I did. It was funny. It was over in my preview, but it wasn't in what was actually coming out. So it was kind of a weird thing. All right, doesn't matter. You find yourself at a command prompt, and you need to find out what type of system you're on. So you've never been on a Linux box, and you want to find some stuff about it. What is the release and version of the system? And again, and then I try to add a little more information to this, because obviously anybody can just go do the labs. But why would we want to know the release and the version of the system? Well, if I'm new to the company, and somebody tells me, hey, you're maintaining these, 1,000 servers or something, well, I might want to know what release and version of all my servers I have. Now, are there better ways than just typing in a bash command at each individual server? Absolutely. Like we got to crawl before we walk, before we run, and that kind of concept. But if we can individually do, there we go. If we can individually do these things, then we can start to automate them and hit multiple servers and understand how we connect other servers and all that kind of stuff. Right? We start to learn all of these things as we go. But we got to start with something. And what's the version of the system is probably one of the most important things, because it's going to dictate all the commands you use. It's going to dictate all the things that you're going to move. Yeah, sending. I came on earlier. I came on and I wasn't even talking. My microphone was off because my system had rebooted. And then I was explaining how, like, for the last 2 weeks, I've set up streams. Like, I just haven't streamed for like 2 weeks. And then I started to, I just started like 10 streams in the last, I don't know, like last 2 weeks. And I just fucking didn't turn it on, man. I just didn't do it. I was like, oh, I'm not gonna. And then I've been rewatching all the old X-Files. So Anyways, what's the release of the version of the system? So cat etsy splat release will, in most modern Linux systems, tell you the type of server you're on. So I'm on an Ubuntu type server. I can see the specific version of it, and this is tremendously important if you guys are going to get support. If you're working for an enterprise or you're working for like a government or something and they have contracts back with Canonical for Ubuntu, because Canonical kind of runs all that support, you need to know the version. When you send in a ticket, if you're not going to give them the version and the kernel, you're not going to hear anything back until you get that request from them. What's the version and the kernel you're on? That's the first things you're always going to hear. So if you're ever going to put some support ticket in, you might as well have that. Also, is my thing really going? I feel like my I'm looking down at my closed captioning. I think it's going really slow. Code Reader said you had a hard time understanding how to configure NAT. Are you talking about on an actual Cisco device? It's actually funny. I was teaching that earlier tonight in college. Well, I was teaching my students specifically static. I was showing them how IP routing tables are built inside of Cisco devices and stuff. So I just got done. Actually, that kind of motivated me. I was like talking to my students and I was going, and then I was going to go on a I don't know SonicWall as well. But I can tell you typically NAT, so NAT is 1-to-1 or 1-to-many. But for me, when I do any type of NAT, I need to know all my external IP addresses, and then I need to know all my internal ones. And then typically we're not actually using NAT, we're using what's called PAT, port address translation. And then port address translation is NAT overloading, right? So I only have 10 external IP addresses, but I have 1,000 internal, and then it maps the ports as it goes out, and it just keeps a mapping of them between external and internal. If you have any code reader, if you have any specific question, I try to help out, but drop them in the Discord if you want in networking. I'll give you whatever help I can, but I don't know SonicWall well. I was a PIX guy. I back before they changed the firewall from PIX to ASA, right, for Cisco. I used to do all their stuff. Also, I'm pretty sure this just broke. Hold on. Is that better? Let's see. Let's see if subtitles are better now. Let's see. Are they working? They are not working. That's from like a few minutes ago. All right, let's see if it catches up. I'm curious. I'm going to let this thing catch up if it wants to. I might just turn those off if they're gonna be that far behind. I'm actually genuinely curious if this is gonna catch up. Let's give this thing a minute real quick. Hold on. Let's see if this thing goes. Oh, you know what? Let me check my music too, because I feel like, oh yeah, this thing is not looping, not. Play all. Go to the next one. There you go. Cool. That'll bounce around a little bit. All right. Yeah, this thing is really backed up. All right, anyways, I'll just keep talking, and we'll see if my closed captioning is even kind of playing along. So what's the kernel version? How long has the system been up? This is really important, right? Like I tell you guys, like when I go look at a server, if I get called out in the middle of the night and something's wrong, typically if I'm getting called out, something's pretty wrong, because I'm not typically like a first level responder to things, although I can be. I take an on-call rotation. The time that a server's been up is kind of huge to me. Like, I know if it's recently rebooted, this server's only been up 57 minutes. If this server's got a problem, it's probably in some kind of configuration. Man, this thing is way behind over here. All right, anyways, and then we're going to just go through and we're going to look at some of this stuff. So again, we can click, if you're doing the lab, you can just click over here and it'll do the commands for you. So cat etsy splat release. But where is that reading from, right? That's catting all the files that are there. But if you want to see what's actually happening, if you do an ls-l on Etsy splat release, you'll see that it's reading from two different locations there, right? It's Etsy LSB release, and then Etsy OS release is actually a link, that's a soft link, over to one directory up. That's what dot dot means. It means the parent directory, user lib OS release. So it's actually funny because that is both a relative path. This is a relative path here, but that's also an absolute path, which is kind of funny. They're using an absolute path as a relative path. But if you were to ask, the technical answer to this is a relative path. But if I were just to, so if I were to ls user lib OS release, it would be there. And then if I were to cd to Etsy, right, which is where we're at, then I do an ls dot dot user lib OS release. Although the dot dot is redundant at that point because it's, but it does exist, right? And we could do this to see in an absolute path sense. Dash LH, right? There it is there, and then here you can do the LH after. It just doesn't look as nice. They're the same file, right? We could also check some of them. We can do a bunch of things to see that they're the same file, but we don't need to get in all those now. But I mean, I guess if anybody's super curious, the way that you would check that those are exactly the same is CK sum. You could do SHA sums. There's a whole bunch of SHA sums, and then you would just compare those to the other file, which again, we're just being silly. It's the same file, but if we wanted to validate it, it might look like this, right? Why might that matter? Well, if I'm looking for like a source of truth, like maybe I have a bunch of systems that all configure themselves off of one file, and one server sees those files differently than other servers, that may be a valuable thing for me to know. Like, why is this one server that I think is looking at the same path not seeing it the same? Well, maybe there's a reason for that. Maybe it's like a locally stored version and we're not properly NFS mounting, or there could be all kinds of reasons. Hold on, let me get this out of the way. This is bugging me that this is not. You know what? Let me just close that. Let me open a different. I'm just going to open a different presentation that I have, and let's see if this works better. Does this one work better? Does this one have? All right. Well, maybe we just needed to clear some kind of cache somewhere. All right. Anyways, so it looks like that's working a lot better. So it says now let's dig a little deeper. So do each command and think about what you're looking at, and you may run them multiple times. So again, remember, you're just some Linux admin on the system, and you're just figuring stuff out about the system. You've never been on it before. Maybe we want to know what the virtual memory of this system is. So we might use like vmstat. And vmstat gives us a bunch of information about the system. One of the things that I might want to know is I would use nproc to see the number of processors I have. This is a pretty small box. I mean, they're giving us a free console on the internet, so a free terminal on the. It's not actually a console; it's just a terminal. Free terminal on the internet. So one processor is pretty fair, and I can see up here the runnable and blockable processes being used against that one processor. So as a general rule here, if any of these showed that the runnable or the blockable were higher than 1, I would know that this system was using, there was wait time. There was a, what we call a queue formed to use the processor. I would know that. Now, these are things that you might say, well, how would you know that? Well, you can read the man on vmstat, and you can see what -r means, or let's say runnable. Right? And it says right here, this is the number of runnable processes running or waiting for runtime. And again, if you're higher than the number of processors, then you're waiting. And the number of processes blocking waiting for IO to complete. So those are ones that don't have access to the to the CPU and have to wait, right? All that to say, I look at this and go, is this system under any kind of real load? There's a bunch of other ways to determine that too, but one of the things we might say is is the system under high memory usage? And the answer is it's got a fair amount of free memory. It's got some in buffer and cache, and we can go look at that. But this system is not, strictly speaking, utilizing all of its resources right now. So there's no like real noticeable weight for anything as far as that goes, right? Like memory's not completely full. If I were looking at this as a database server, one of the things I always look at on database servers is there still free memory or is it out? We are not swapping. You do not want to swap in like enterprise, like in your labs and stuff when you're playing around with Linux, feel free to swap all day. Professional Linux, we don't swap. We have swap. We have to configure swappable memory. And what swappable memory is memory that's no longer, like we've used more memory than we have allocated. We've kind of ballooned up typically. And then we're starting to use some slower thing like memory. We're starting to use like disk or block to store memory. We do not want to swap in professional. I haven't had swap as like a viable memory option for well over 15 years now. Do we still have it there? Sure. Are we using it? No. Your swap should be 0. In fact, I've had alerts on all professional Linux systems that I've run for the last 15 years. If swap ever starts, I want to know. That's it. Now, do you have to have swap available for certain processes to even start? Like Oracle needs a certain amount of swap relative to the memory that you have on your box, but you would never want to be swapping for a database ever, because it's going in. You got to remember, your memory, your random accessible memory in a system is going to operate at least 100 times faster than any of your block storage. So you don't want to be writing off to block storage and then having this tremendous wait time coming back for databases or any of that kind of stuff. But anyways, that's the thing to know. Other commands, we can check the CPU usage on this. So mpstat15 will show us what's going on with the CPU. And if I had told you nothing else about this and you went and looked at it, would you say that the system's under any kind of high load? So that's an interesting thing. This is that's actually really important to know. So when you use these numbers after, they're what we call arguments typically on a command line, or sometimes there'll be options, but that's a good question. So what does that number mean? So vmstat, if I just use 1 here, it's the interval. So every 1 second forever. This will go until the sun swallows the earth, or until the 1 hour's up, 45 more minutes on the system, right? But I can also pick a different interval. I can say, you know what? I don't want slices that often. I want every 5 seconds. So this would be every 5 seconds forever. So it's the increment and then the number of increments or the total number that you want. So this one's 5. And then if I say 5, this would be every 5 seconds for 25 total seconds now, right? And it's just a slice. It's just that exact second across the server to see, is it doing good? It's not an aggregate of the last 5 seconds. These are just slices of exactly what's happening at this time. They're querying the proc directory. The /proc directory is where everything inside of Linux is kind of run in the Linux kernel. So see, that was about 20 seconds. And by the way, I can time that. I can say, well, let's go ahead and put a little stopwatch in our hand. I love the time command. It's one of my favorite things. When I'm writing documentation for junior engineers, I will run the time command often to be able to say, hey, at this part of the step, it's going to take, while this is installing, it takes about 12 to 15 minutes, because that's what my time was during my testing. And because I don't want people hitting Control-C and killing stuff early. Time shows us 3 things. Oh, well, it was 20 seconds on the clock. So our real time was 20 seconds. And 20 seconds makes sense because the first iteration was at the 0 second, and then it was every there. Oh, Equiprice, you did this last night. Nice. Well, hopefully it's useful to you. I like putting these together. Here's the user and the system space against that. This is how much of user and system space call or syscalls were made against the actual processor. So what you could surmise by looking at this is this for 20 seconds did not use much against the kernel. We could try another one. We could say time sleep 10, and let's see what happens when we sleep for 10 seconds. Does that spin up our system in any way? Not really. But it takes 10 seconds to run. We'll see that as the real time. But the user and the syscall is not much. But we can time other things, and we can see how much other things took. We can do, it's in a later lab, but there's like a bunch of things that we can kind of do there and see kind of what's going on. But for this lab, we are pretending essentially to be, some new engineer or new admin, and we're in an environment. And I tell you guys think I'm joking about this, but like you'll get hired on and you'll be the only Linux person, and the manager will be standing over you, and they'll be like, "All right, you've got in, you've gotten into like the first system, you've got like some generic password somebody give you or some permission, and then you become root or whatever." And they're gonna be standing over you, and they're gonna be like, "All right, it's all yours," and you're gonna go, "Hey, do we have like a map of the network? Do we have good documentation?" And they're gonna go. I'm telling you guys, the manager's gonna go like this. They're gonna go, "Oh, you," and they're gonna turn around and walk out, and you're gonna be like, "Motherfucker," and I tell you guys that jokingly, but also in my company Redline that I work for, one of my many tasks, me and some of the other guys, one of my many tasks. I mean, I work for NOAA full time, right? I'm on that project. That's NOAA. But another thing that I'll do when a customer, like a newer customer, wants to set something up or do something, they will like give me like a little parachute and drop me in, and I'll just have to like go and figure everything out in this new network and this new system and this new whatever. Sometimes I'm building brand new systems, and that's a lot easier. But sometimes I'm also dropping in to like help a customer out with something in the high performance compute space. So it's like I spend a lot of time doing this. And you might say, well, Scott, don't you have things that'll go and collect all that for? Oh yeah, I have all kinds of like little automations that I've built over the years that make this easier. But when I'm showing it to you guys and explaining to you guys the job and the value, I try to explain to you guys as much. And some of you guys, like Runamacher's been around a long time with us here, but he knows that like I try to show you guys I do simple things well. I'm not the smartest engineer in a room of like 20 engineers. I've never been, but I know how to do simple things well, and I build simple things well, and those things work well. And then that's not me being some Chad telling you guys like, oh, like let's pat myself on the back some more. No, it's just I do simple things, and then gather information about things and figure stuff out. So anyways, we're looking at the system. We were looking specifically here for, is the memory completely allocated? And then we were looking for here, is the CPU completely allocated? And guys, there's so many other commands we could use besides mpstat. We might, by the way, you might not always have vmstat or mpstat on systems. Typically, we have to install a tool called iostat. So it's iostat is the name of the package that installs that. In fact, I might have even, these labs, I may have even had to install that, because I don't think older Ubuntu 2404 might have it by default. But let's see. I need that. Oh, huh. Thought we had iostat. Am I thinking about? Oh, it's God, guys, you guys stop me. Iostat's the command. Syststat is the syststat. There it is. Yeah. I thought that was on there. Yeah, I don't know what's going on. Yeah, sending. All right. So let's go look at something else that's going on in the system, and I'm going to introduce a new kind of construct. So we're at a command line here, right? And I was teaching my students Cisco networking earlier. But what are when you think about it, what are the things that you actually do at a command prompt? You really only do two things. And I know that this is like going to sound like an oversimplification, but remember I said I do things simply. When you're at a command prompt here, the only thing this prompt can do is three things. It can take standard input, and it can give us standard output, or it can tell us we're stupid and give us standard error. Those are the three things that it can do. But all I can do at a system really is I can set things and check things. And you say, Scott, you're being overly simple. I don't know, man. That's the way I look at it. Like, I'm really either setting values in a system and then checking that they took or that they didn't, or I'm checking like the state of the system, kind of like we're doing now. But those are really the only two things. I mean, for all intents and purposes, I'm at a pane of glass here, and I'm connected to a system, and I'm playing ping pong. It's like I'm playing a ping pong game. I'm yelling into this void of Bash, and Bash is either giving me something back, or it's telling me I'm stupid. But those things I'm doing, I'm either configuring things or I'm checking values. Those are the only two things I do at a command line. And I mean, maybe there's some sub variances of that maybe nuance that could be found. But for me, that's kind of the way that I think of my job. I'm sending things in, I'm pulling things out. All right. Yeah, it was systat. Yeah, Runmucker, you're right. I don't know what was wrong with me. My brain's not working the way that it used to. But let's go look at what this system's doing now for packages. I'm going to do 2 commands here, and I'm going to introduce a new thing. And the first one, as we sent in these 2 commands, ps-ef, just dumped a bunch of stuff to our screen. And unless you were really, really fast, you didn't catch all of them. But there's some things I can do to this command. So I can press up a few times, ps-ef. I can word count -L and just count it. There's 123 of whatever were there. But I've added this new thing, which is called a pipe. This pipe operator for us catches what would have come to the screen and does something else with it. Puts the standard out that was coming from this into the standard input of this command, right? So I know this is super simple for some of you guys that have been here for a long time. You're like, oh, Scott's going way back. Excuse me. We're going a little beginner stuff here. But we're catching that big long output up there, and we're throwing it into the input, the standard in of the next command, which is word count -L, which is counting word count by lines. We could have done this a different way. We could have said word count -S, well, maybe -C, and that would give us all the characters, but that's less useful maybe. Because maybe for me, I know that all the lines are what matter, but if you needed to know more about that command, you would read the man pages for it. Here's the word count man pages. The C is bytes, so that's how many bytes that output was. The M would be the chars. The -L is typically useful for us because a lot of times the new line character is like almost like a field delimiter for us, so I know there was 136 valid entries or whatever. But these are all the things maybe that I want. But maybe I don't want it to be summary like that. Maybe I want to know how many there are, but I still want to see it. I like NL for that. That's number line. It'll just throw number lines at the beginning for me. And this will tell me, well, there's 123. It messes up the format a little bit. But there's 123 of whatever these things are. And I can kind of go and I can look through them, right? Okay. All right, that's maybe useful to me. But there's a bunch of pieces of information here, but I don't really see them because I'm only seeing the bottom. So maybe I clear the screen real quick. And maybe I do that PS and then I say head. I just want to see like I just want to kind of get a feel for like what the data are that I'm looking at, right? And that would be head. Head typically shows you the first 10 lines, but it's configurable. Everything's configurable, right? But just suffice it to say, we're using the ps-ef command to see all the processes, and then we're capturing that output. Instead of coming to standard output, it goes into the standard input of the next command, right? So head here gives me the, you can call these all kinds of things, but a lot of people call these the headers. And then here's each column, right? Here's each column. And these columns are loosely what we would call space delimited, in that their field separator, their FS, their field separator is a space or many spaces. So here's the first column, here's the second column, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, eighth, as long as they're all touching. But if there were multiple things in this command, then we would have multiple other, if I were to go like head dash, maybe 10 is the default, maybe 20. No, I don't see any, but maybe the command field has multiple. We just go look at the whole thing, maybe, right? And yeah, see some of these, that's going to introduce more and more columns, which then starts to be problematic if I'm going to filter by columns, but not that problematic, but it's a little problematic. If I were looking for certain things or that kind of stuff. But suffice it to say that there's all these things that we can start to use with pipes. Now, this command started to get weird because then after the base command, we use this. We piped to awk. Awk is a super powerful programming language that I really only use for like 2 or 3 things, right? I'm not gonna like sit here and tell you guys I'm some awk master. That is not true. I know how to reference awk though, and I can make awk do some useful things. But honestly, guys, I mostly use it to filter by columns. So what column did I pick here? Well, I said go ahead and give me that first column. So awk by default, I did not give a field separator, -F, I didn't give that. But if I had, that would be there, but we don't have a dash F, so I'm using the first field, and I'm saying just print $1, which is assigned to this first field. And then I said, go ahead and sort it, so now they're all in line by each other, meaning that, see how it was like root, and then DHCPD, and then root again like this. We sorted them, and then we did unique to collapse them down with a -C flag or option. We typically call those options when they're like this, as opposed to arguments, which can come later. And this aggregated down and counted those all up for me. Now, let's take this command apart in the best way that I know how, which is just to take each piece off of it. So let's take the piece off that counted it all and compressed it, and let's just look at this part. There we go. There is everything in order, as we said, and then it gets squished down by sort. This is very interesting. Watch this. I'm going to take the sort out and just use unique-C. And I'm going to show you a limitation of the unique command, because a lot of people, I mean, unless you've used Linux for a bit, you might not know this. The unique command only compresses like entries that are adjacent to each other. So you say, well, why then did this work? Well, because this one sorted them first, so they were all next to each other, and then squished them down. Kind of like, if you've ever seen somebody make a sandwich and then they squish it. If the things are all like, they squish, I don't know, that's not a good example, but it squishes together correctly here. So where do I go with that? Well, this is not a good count. I would be like, well, there's 86 root, and then there's 8 root, and then there's 1. I'm not very good at counting like that, so I would probably get the wrong number, right? I can't count, and I only have so many fingers. But the system, if it organizes them for me with sort, then I can unique really quickly. Now, you might look at this and go, well, Scott, that's okay, but that's like not super useful. I'm a sysadmin. I've been doing this for a bit. How might I use this? The way I typically use this, let's go look at some data real quick. Let's say cat etc passwd real quick. So this is maybe a common way that I would look. etc passwd is a file for people that haven't been around and done this stuff. It's a file that has 7 fields. Those 7 fields determine everything about a user, right? And it maps a user back to an ID. As far as a user ID right here in the 3rd field. Let's not worry about all these right now, but let's just say that I needed to know something particular about the system. In the 7th field over here, the last field as it were, there is information about if this user can log in or not on the system. There's and specifically if they have a shell that's valid, right? So, oh, how's it going, Trevor? I was going to message you the other day. I don't know if you guys saw, or I don't know if some of you saw, our site was down, but it's because we had like a catastrophic network. I don't want to go into it, but all 4 of my XCP-ng boxes went down at the same time, and I'm pretty sure it was for some forced update, but I've never seen that happen before. So yeah, so Trevor, I got it all back up, and then my Kubernetes was down, but it should be back up now. This should all be. Yeah, and guys, if you don't know, Trevor over on the YouTube side, he built all this for us. This is all of our, this is our basic little web page for people that want to do like our sysadmin course. We have a bunch of free stuff down in Discord, guys. We don't charge anybody for any of this stuff. Learning about security engineering, all that stuff that I do for, shoot, all kinds of projects, right? But anyways, yeah, Trevor, I appreciate you being around. I was going to look for you the other day and make sure you were doing all right. But real quick, guys, so I'm back on this, and I showed you all the data. Maybe I could have done something like this and just looked at the raw data here. It was a backdoor you put in there. That's funny. So here's this. But I want this 7th field because I want to see who has a valid shell that could actually get onto this server in the context of running a shell, right? Any user that doesn't have a shell can't get in. They can still, there's other things that can happen, but from a bash prompt perspective, they're not going to get an active shell. So how would I do that, right? Well, I just need to know these commands a little more than what I had showed earlier. So I know that awk will give me columns, but now I have this field delimiter or field separator, some people call it, of a colon. So if I say cap F colon, right? Cap F, yep, not no cap, capital F. You can also do it like this. It depends. This is a personal preference and taste thing. If I'm doing it by myself and nobody's watching, I do it like this. if people are watching, or if I was going to put this in a script, I would probably do that. By the way, the net effect is exactly the same, but some people, that may be more clear what's happening, right? So we always write things in our scripts and code and whatever we're doing. My instructions would look like this if I was writing this for another engineer to do this. But now I need to say, okay, I want from that to print the 7th field. And we tell awk to print the 7th field like this, right? And then now we can do, this is just an exercise in the same thing we did earlier. We'll sort all of those so like things are together, and then we'll do a unique -c to count them. There we go. I didn't know what all those values were in there before, but I knew there were some bin bashes because those are all the people that should be able to log in. And then I have my user sbin no login, and then I have my, so I have all of these things here, right? And you might say, Scott, well, that's cool, but that doesn't tell you who is the actual one that can log in and who are these other ones that can't. And I say, no, you're right. By the way, this was just me kind of like, this would be maybe like if I was auditing all my systems to make sure all my users were exactly the same. This may be a quick way that I thought to do that. Another way would be maybe just to make sure that all my Etsy Pass WDs are the exact same weight with checksum. Bunch of different ways to do this, right? Like, but this may be, some of you may go, well, Scott, you could have, you could have not even cat the file. You could just grep for, bash from Etsy Pass WD. And I say, yeah, that might have worked. Now, bash will sometimes be maybe in a description or a username, so you might have to filter that down or play with that a little bit, but that's another way to do it. But this doesn't count it. So maybe I do a NL, right? Or a word count -L, right? It's guys, I'm like maybe I'm like a 10 trick pony, not a 1 trick pony. I have like 10 things that I do. No, but the point is you can start to learn how to manipulate these files and look at things and again, we're crawling before we walk or before we run. Eventually, once we know how to use some of these tools and do these things and string these commands together, then what we start to do is we build them into automations, we build them into our scripts, we build them into playbooks. There's things that we check and there's things that we set. In the concept of checking things, we're just checking them. We're not actually doing any kind of changing of these values. In fact, nothing I've done on this system has actually changed anything. I'm just looking at things, right? But this is a very valuable way to find information in an environment, right? Okay, so keep going down. We've got PIDstat. PIDstat is going to give every 1 second for 5 iterations all of the processes that are running against the CPU. So when it started, there was nothing really running except for PIDstat. And it's a slice. It's not an aggregate for that second. It's what it sees at that drum beat of 1 second. So here it saw node was running, saw node whatever that is, something. But general, and then here's the process ID for it, so we can go see what it was doing. Everything in your Linux kernel is going to be tied back to a process ID. I probably should have mentioned that earlier, but PSEF, and maybe we look for this KC-terminal, and I can see the process and the parent process for each of these commands. Like KC terminal is doing something, and then here's another one, and this is a child process of this one here, because here's the process ID, and this one here is his process ID for this command, but there's the parent process ID. And then this other one, this KC terminal, is coming from bash. This KC terminal should be, yeah, we could go see what he's coming from. I think it's coming from bash. Yeah. So there's a bash prompt here of 1820. And that comes from 1273 as well, which is that guy right there. So this spawned bash, and then this spawned this other KC terminal that we were seeing, right? We can start to see, guys, this is one of these things where the more you touch this stuff, the more you dig in, the more you can go look at kind of what's going on. And I'm just kind of digging in on stuff as I see it. But then we can go and we can say, okay, well, what files does this have open? And I can say lsof-p for a process ID of 1272, and I can see the files that this is holding. and what dynamic link libraries it's using over here, and how is this, like, what is this doing? And then maybe as in a more, maybe we want to see an exact bash process that's running, or let's say like a port that's being listened to. So ss-ntulp, and this will show us all the processes, right? All the open ports on our system. These are all the ways that my system can be connected to, right? And I have other labs that kind of dig into this more, but in this case, I have 22 here, which is the universal, right, SSH. This is how we connect in. I see that the daemon is SSHD, and I can see the process ID, the PID for that is 1192. So I can go here and say LSOF-I. This is one of my favorite things, 22 right here. And I can see for that port, this is the port, by the way, that port is being listened to by these PIDs, process IDs. And then that process ID, so I'll look for the process ID of 1192. What is it holding open? What does it think it's looking at? Here's all these dynamic link libraries over here. So if I knew something was missing or having a problem or wouldn't start, I may start by going and looking at what things are open. And then I can see that it's actually holding open these ports or listening on TCP port 22. And that is being automatically mapped there from this file here, cat etc services. And then let's just grep for SSH. There's 22. And if you want it, if you said, Scott, can you prove that to me? I'll prove it to you real quick. I'm going to VI that file real quick. And we're going to go to the 22 right here. And I'm going to call this Scott, Twitch, or let's say live, right? So now that was definitely not in that file before, right? And then now I'll go redo this command from earlier, the LSOF. And down here, now look how it's no longer SSH like it was. Now it's SSH Scott. It's mapping from the etc services file in real time. This kind of becomes important. You're not going to modify that file much, but that becomes important when you're doing commands to see what's happening inside of a system, and you're not forcing the number. Like I force the numeric, but if you pull the numeric off, this will go by the port number, or by the port if it can map. I never want to see that, guys. Personally, I never want to see what the system thinks it is. I always want to see the active port, because, and you say, well, why? Well, because I know that's 22, so then I can go LSOF-I port 22. But if I didn't know that, now I would have to go figure that out and map that. I want the system to map it for me most of the time. Does everybody always want that? No, I mean, I could see reasons to do stuff otherwise. Now, I would not normally leave that in etc services. But let's say, that's just terrible. I'm just hitting X to delete. Escape :WQ to write. Some people like Shift ZZ or something like that. There's a bunch of different ways to write a file. And then I can make sure that it's there. I would also typically not have directly modified a service file like that. I would copy etc services to like etc services.orig or something like that. Or I might do .orig and then something like this, date plus %F. And then if I ls-l etc services like that, then I would see the original from today, and then I might leave older versions of that, right, to make sure that everything in my system is the way that I kind of expected. I could also then, if I needed to see as a real quick thing, I might do, I can kind of see that these are exactly, pretty much exactly the same here. But if I wanted to check versions or something like that, I could also check some of them, make sure there's no difference. There's all kinds of things we can do. System checksum might look like this, right? And CK, oh God, it's checksum, but it's CK sum. Are they exactly the same file? Yes, because I moved it back. If I hadn't moved it back, it would be the new file, and then I would have to go figure out what the differences was. I could do that with a diff command, right? So if I VI etc services back again, etc services, right? And I go change that back to like that Scott thing. I don't know. Whatever it was, it doesn't really matter. I can diff them. Right? And then it would tell me that in one it's one way, in the other it's the other way. And then diff opens up a whole nother door, because now with diff, we can only look at one side. We can only look at aggregate change. There's like, I mean, being good at diff is its own thing, and I don't consider myself really great at it, but diff has all kinds of stuff that I can do, and I can only look at one of the ones as nice as you can look at side by side if you want. We can add the -y at the end, although I don't prefer that, right? We can see it side by side and just look for things that exist only on one or the other, but that's a bit much typically. Some people only like to see like only the output of one side and not the other side. So that's a common way to look at things, but there's all kinds of stuff to play with in here to compare two things, right? Because just if you don't know this already, I'm going to tell this for some of you, and this might hurt your heart like deep down, but you are not as good as a computer at comparing two things. I don't care if you're the smartest dude around. That thing has like 30,000 lines, right? And this thing will do it like that and tell me the one line that's different, whereas you're still like trying to open the file between the two of them. The system's better at that than you, and hopefully that doesn't hurt anybody's feelings too much, but I'm going to tell you it's for sure true. The system is better at finding errors than you are. So you got to learn how to use the tools to do that kind of stuff. It's the same thing when we parse logs. We have this talk coming up in one of the security engineering courses. No, we just did log parsing actually. And one of the things I emphasize in the log parsing is you don't do it as good as the system does, right? So learn your tools, get good at parsing things down, but then also send it off and let your SIEM tools do the things that they should. You can play with that as much as you want there. Oh, and then I asked a question here about this PID stat from earlier. Why are they sometimes longer or shorter? Well, it just depends how many things are accessing the kernel, or the kernel is accessing the CPU for a specific PID at any given time. That's why these will always be different lengths right here. And then that's very similar to the next question I asked, which is like IOStat XZ. This one is going to show you the same basic thing, but it's going to show you it for, let's look here, it's going to show you for the CPU and also for block devices. And at first, the only block device that's being looked at as the system first turns on and looks at it is XVDA. But then it only shows you the delta. So if anything's being used here, there's no devices being used, no device being used, no device being used. So nothing was doing I/O to the disk. I believe I can modify that to only show block like this, maybe. Yeah, this only show the block devices. So nothing's happening against the disk. But maybe I wanted to come over here and make something write to the file, right? So maybe I just had over here, let's just say, I don't know. Maybe this will work. So we could do something like for I in, let's go sequence to 1,000. So this will make 1,000 files. Do touch some, we'll go in root some file $i. So it's just going to add I to the file. Well, it's going to add the number each time. And then let's say sleep 1 and done. Now this may happen so fast that it doesn't really show up here, but let's see if maybe we see that on the device. Yeah, because they'd have to be writing at the exact same time. That's not going to be as easy to see as if I did something like this. That would have went for 1,000 seconds. Maybe I just do dd. Don't worry about what we're doing here. Infile equals dev random. I'll do dev 0, and then outfile equals root big file, right? And oh, you know what? Let's leave this running over here while that goes. So we'll just leave this running over here forever. Now, look, it's not doing anything, right? The disk is not getting any access right now. There's nothing to look at. But watch, I'm gonna come over here and I'm gonna say make a big file, and then block size will be 1024K, so 1 meg, and count will be equal to 5,000. So it'll do 5,000 1 meg blocks, which is approximately 5 gigs. And for fun, we'll time it, right? So we're going to hit time on that. And over here now we see writing. We see writing out to that file. And actually, I'll tell you exactly when it's done right here. Watch, it's writing, it's writing, it's writing. There's I/O happening, and it's done. can stop that, come over here, it's done. It took 8 seconds. It copied approximately, 5.2 gigs. And it took 640 megs a second writing out. So that pretty much jives with what we expect as far as 8 and some change seconds. It didn't really use much in the user space, but it did use some in the system space. Let me get rid of that. It's bugging me. And then basically we just proved that our tool worked the way that we expected it to. The tool was telling us in each second slice that there was writing out to the block. And you can use this to find, oh man, there's all kinds of things. You want to find the not the default, but like the baseline, how much I/O is happening to my disks. There you go. You want to know like peak I/O to the disks as you do some database query. Boom, right? And they're very high level, very generic. There's other ways to do all this, and there's other tools, but they're looking at the same type of stuff, and they're giving you the same types of pieces of information as far as being, in a Linux command line, doing these kind of things. So, okay. Anyways, what's this last one? Let's see. Where's it go? And it says, now let's dig a little deeper. We're going to do some networking traffic. We'll look at some network stuff. So, maybe we use the SAR command to look at how much traffic is flowing on our interfaces here. So here's our interfaces. We've got loopback that is always there on any IPv4 or IPv6 network, right? There's an ENP1S0, and that had a little bit of receiving of packets and transmitting of packets. So receive is always RX, TX is always transmit, right? That is universal across all engineering. Any communications engineering you ever find yourself in, and I teach that stuff as well. If you guys don't know, that's what I do. I'm an engineer, but I also teach this stuff at college, as far as like the Cisco and the networking side of things. And then Docker. So Docker doesn't really have much traffic, and we might expect that. We might know that that's the case. But our interfaces aren't really getting too much packets in and out of them. But we can look at the packets. We can also look at the TCP traffic. So these are established TCP traffic that's happening. And we can see both the active ones and then also if there's any errors. These are errors down here. And we can also separate this out to only see TCP. So we only want to see TCP established connections that are happening. There's none right now. There's nothing really going on. Maybe there's a little bit going on. And then maybe we want to see the errors for TCP. So if we are establishing large amounts of communication, maybe this server is acting as a reverse proxy, or what we call like a load balancer colloquially in the industry, right? This server is acting as like a TLS termination endpoint to backend systems. We may have a huge number of errors start popping up, and that may be indicative of us having like a certificate problem. We're not properly terminating communications or whatever, and we would be seeing those errors pop up in our system. So there's all kinds of things that we can see, right? But we got to get used to using our tools. And one thing that I always tell you guys, I only probably have a little bit longer before the wife gets home. One thing that I tell you guys is there's 4 big ones that we look at. There's 4 things that we want to understand the behavior of in our Linux system. In fact, I'll pull this up as a slide deck because this is up in our Discord as well. People always ask, like, hey, is this in Discord? This particular presentation I'm about to pull up is in Discord. Where do I have this? Prologue presentations. This is Linux Systems Administration. So this is a talk that I've done quite a few times. In fact, I even might have pulled it up the other day. But this is Linux Systems Administration. Let me move this up a little bit so you guys can still see that. And these are the big 4. So as we talk about any of this stuff, and again, this is in the Discord, so if you guys want it, and you go, oh, those are all interesting commands, I want to plug them in and see what happens. There's all kinds of commands in this one. But there's things that we want to look at, the utilization, saturation, and errors against the big 4. So right here. The big 4 are CPU, memory, disk, and network. If you can, if you're in an interview and you only have a few minutes to talk about your time and you only have at the end of the day, we're doing this to talk about getting you guys the job. You only have a little bit of time to maybe explain your experiences, and somebody says, well, tell me a little bit about like troubleshooting you've done. Maybe it's, if the person's done this stuff, even if it's kind of subconscious for you to, you're kind of using a little bit of psychology on them, you start talking about things in the concepts of like, well, they ask you about problems you've experienced, and you're like, well, for CPU I've troubleshot it this way, and memory I've troubleshot it this way, and disk I've done these things, for network I've done these things, and you start to like break these things down. They might not even realize that you've just hit all the big things, right? They might just be like, oh wow, this person, like they understand the game. And I try to tell you guys, like, a lot of I didn't understand this when I was younger, because school would have been so easy for me as a kid if I had just understood the game. I just always fought the system instead of doing the stuff. But then it's like, as soon as I hit my senior year of high school, I was like, wait a minute, I can get straight A's if I just do the shit, and nobody will bug me anymore. And then ever since then, I've had like straight A's through that in college and all this stuff. But it's only because I realized that it's all about playing the game. Well, it's the same thing with like getting a job. It's the same thing if you want to be a consultant. Learn how these things work, and then learn, like, so for me, the game of Linux administration is keeping these things in harmony: the CPU, the memory, the disk, the network. Now, do we just manually go run these commands all day as fast as we can? No, we have tools that monitor this stuff, and we turn it into all this, all this Grafana monitoring that we build and all that kind of stuff, which we'll probably build out in this kind of series. We'll go through those labs again. But yeah, like, what are we doing as a systems administrator, as we're building systems as engineers? We're looking at the utilization, saturation, and errors of those systems to see what's going on, right? And then, this is that talk. This is up in the Discord again, if anybody needs it. If you're wondering, like, where is it in the Discord, you go to Discord, and you go down to, I think it's all in old presentations. So here's old presentations that people have given to our group. Some of these are recorded, some of these are not. But here's my Socratic method Linux. If you guys have ever wanted to test yourself, like, how well do you understand Linux, and ask yourselves questions and make sure that you're ready to be an admin, that's all there. Here's Linux Systems Admin right here. Boom, I'm not a liar. I posted that like a year ago when I updated it. Maybe we'll update it again one of these days soon, but it's got all kinds of stuff. It's got testing methodologies, benchmarking, troubleshooting. Yeah. So, okay, I only have a little bit more time because I think my wife's getting home soon. But yeah, that was one lab. Hey, Hayes, how's it going? Hayes, I saw that you're doing like noise every day. I think that's what you're actually calling it. I'm not calling it noise. I think that's what you're actually calling it. But you're generating music every day on YouTube. I thought that was kind of cool. I didn't post it for everybody because I was like, well, if he wants to post it, he'll post it himself. But you're welcome to post that up in the Discord if you want people to see. Because I know, so you guys that don't know, Hayes builds. He does a lot of musical stuff, right? And he does synth work type stuff. And it's actually pretty cool. Not for everybody, right? Like, not everybody's gonna like his noise every day, but it's interesting, right? If you want to see how somebody builds music and beats and repeats and all that kind of stuff. Yeah. No, that's awesome, Hayes. Yeah, I like that. Yeah. Hey, post that stuff up, man. Off-topic channel or in the hobbies activity, whatever fits for it. I think people, you're gonna find certain amount of people in any environment that like that kind of stuff. I enjoy the process of making music, even though I'm not very good at it. I've been a pianist. Yeah, good. I'm glad it did that right. And also well, I've played guitar most of my adult life, but piano most of my young life. But yeah, Hayes has a YouTube channel. He's down in our Discord for people that want to follow and do that kind of stuff. But I think it's awesome. I think that's just, and I tell engineers all the time, like, we need our outlets. We need, like, we do this stuff. I literally sit at a command line all day. Most of you guys that also do this stuff do as well. And like this stuff, I do think this will like drive you slowly descent into madness. So you have to have your outlets, right? As an engineer, they pay you well so you can do other things too. And that's why I want to get more of you guys into this field so that you guys are doing this. Yeah, but Hayes, that's the thing, is like we're working on stuff and we're getting better at it, right? So, all right. Let's see if I have more time. I should go check real quick. Let me take a break real quick and go check on if the wife's here. Also, by the way, guys, I did put in to go to Scale this next year. So the Scale Expo is March, I think, 6th through 9th. So I might be talking at that. I'm not 100% sure if I will or not. But if they want me to, I will talk at that. Let me go see. Hold on. Let me. Where's my? I guess I could just. I guess I'd do that real quick. Let me put this up real quick. Let me go check on the wife real quick, and then see like if I have time. Let's say quick break. Quick break. 6 minutes. All right, I'll be right back, guys. See if the wife's here. Gonna hang out with her a little bit if she's here. All right, she's not back, so give me a minute, and then we'll do the next lab. Let's keep going through this stuff. Give me a second here. Wait, what's this question? The output of commands ran tonight was all from one system. Yeah, I was all root. I was the root user the whole time, yep. You do have to be the root user to see most of the things I was showing there, because only the root user can query a lot of the things that we were looking at in proc. Maybe not everything, but for sure some of that stuff you'd have to be root. Yeah, Nito, by the way, I just got back. Man, yeah, we're all mad down here, right? It's like the Mad Hatter's Tea Party. So I'll leave the break up here. We'll come back after the break, because I realized this early on with my college students. I would take breaks and I wouldn't use a timer, and I'd come back and I'd just be like ready to go, and then I was like, wait a minute, they still got 5 more minutes too. That's never that big of a deal when you're in a college classroom, like, because I would just know when most of the students were back and I could go. But for you guys, like when I give like a break, I'm like, well, maybe somebody walked away. Maybe somebody said, oh, Scott gave me 6 minutes. I got time to get down to the store and back or something, right? So I give the full time, right? And also I went downstairs and got a Monster. So we will be doing in this next lab. Let me move that out of the way, because that's kind of in the way there. Boom. The next lab we will do will be, and guys, we're doing the lab, but I'm talking about all this other stuff too that maps roughly, in some ways, it maps roughly back to this, right? Which is like what the job is. So I'll give it a minute and then we'll go again. Let me move that up just a little so it's not in the way. Yeah, there we go. We're roughly mapping these things back to, job duties and this other kind of stuff. And if this stuff's interesting to you and you're like, hey, I do want to go get a job in this field, I've got a lot of resources on how to do that. Everything in our Discord's free. I can link Discord here, and it's also down in the description if you're on the YouTube side of things. But our goal is to, the goal of this group, I think it even says it down there, is getting you guys that are hobbyists and playing around with this stuff into doing it professionally. And I think we got a pretty good track record. We've got a fair amount of people over the years that have gotten into this space that want to. And I do think anybody can do this. You're going to have varying degrees of success based on how much you work at it and that kind of stuff. But yeah, so this was kind of our talk and what we were looking at here as we kind of went. And then some of the stuff we're doing right now is kind of like operating, running systems, like looking at different stuff inside of the environment. So, all right, get this out of the way. Get going. I think the wife, she hasn't texted me. I think she's going to text me when she's on her way home. Let's see. Let me message her real quick. That's weird. She'll be sad. She scrolled off the bottom of my phone for text messages. Wow. That's not often that the wife's that far down. Text when coming home. All right, I'm back. Oh, hey, that's it. Hey, that's a great way to do it. Hire yourself. Find a market, find a niche for things, as people like to say, and start getting contracts and doing stuff. Yeah. I don't know. Hayes, by the way, aside as before I start for a second, have you worked or have you seen Sid Heresy at all? He's another Twitch streamer. I think I recommended him to you before. I think you might have even been in there. I don't know if you've seen his stuff, but his stuff's really good. If in the synth and music space, he's pretty good. He's a sound engineer, so he may have some useful ideas for that. All right. So you're a new system administrator at a company. You've been tasked with finding out information about a set of servers that has little or no documentation to it. I think this may be, again, one of the most accurate things you're going to run into in your career as far as when you first start, this is going to happen to you. So I'm saying check the kernel and package info on the system. Find out the number of kernel versions. This is important for reasons we'll talk about. And then find specific versions of software that the security team has been asking about, and then report back on that, right? Maybe dump out everything in the system. Also, let me put that over there. Okay, good. All right. Contracts and AV, but no thanks. I want IT. Oh, you're doing IT. Oh, well, that's even better. I didn't realize you were going full IT stuff. Are you doing Linux and stuff, or are you going to do mostly like networking and system stuff? I ask because I'm curious. I think if I ever started, by the way, I used to run my own tech company back before 2008. 2008 is kind of when I got out of doing stuff for myself. But I had contracts, I did all that stuff. I did a lot of individual support for companies, and it's just it was a lot of work for me. And then also like the economy kind of crashed, so I went back to work after that. But anyways, yeah, let's look at some of this stuff. Start working shitty WordPress garbage. Oh, nice. Okay. Nice. Fixing up. Yeah, there's probably an unlimited amount of work in that space. All right, so let's look at some kernel stuff. Uname-A will give you a lot of information about the kernel, and probably more than you want. Most people want uname-R or uname-M. So the kernel that you see here will tell you the major version here. Here's the minor version, and then here's what's typically called the patch version. That kind of knowledge comes from a thing called semantic versioning. You do need to know this in engineering space. If you're going to be a software engineer, you need to know this stuff real well. If you're going to be a Linux engineer and DevOps-y type guy and administering servers, you do need to understand it because you're going to have different versions of software and versions of packages. And this is the language. So this is the language of developers. It's the language of security teams. The version of a thing that you're on directly relates to everything about it. What I mean by that is like if I go over to like NIST, right, .org, NIST.org, and then I say that I want to look up CVE database, right, within NIST.org, I can go look at all of the known vulnerabilities. This database here really just gets populated by all kinds of security researchers, and then it just gets dumped back onto you, typically chewed up in some way by companies like Tenable Security or Qualys. These companies, CrowdStrike, which is, they have the Falcon sensor and stuff. And what they're doing is they're looking for vulnerable versions of things that you're running in your environment. That's the simplest way to find things, is go look up vulnerabilities, right, by the version number. So a lot of these tools, guys, and if you were like, well, hey, I want to get into that space, I want to break in, you have the open database right here. You can query this without even paying for an API key. You can query this database every 6 seconds. It's 10 times a minute before they rate limit you. So that's way more than you're probably going to need to start out. But you could query this. You could go scan people's environments, and you could just give them reports of shit that needs to be updated. That's what almost all of these scanning tools do. In case you guys don't know that, that's pretty much all it is. But anyway, so we could search statistics. We can go look at we can actually go do API calls if we wanted to, right? But we can go search through, and maybe I say kernel, right? And I look for kernel vulnerabilities, right? And then maybe, oh, here's a 0 day from back in September. This just happened, right? Wait, is that September? Yeah. And then I go and I look at it and I see what it affects, right? And it'll tell me what it's doing, how they found it. It's from the 0 day initiative. And maybe down here, if I go look, it's got a USB driver. We can look for things specific to Linux as well. But if we were to find the Linux kernel, let's see if we can actually find any actual Linux kernel stuff. It would be tied directly to the version. What I'm saying is, and some of us are still run. There's still old versions of kernels out there. We're up on in Ubuntu 2404, I think. Yeah, Ubuntu 2404.3 long-term support has version 6.8 of the Linux kernel. What am I running at home? In my home lab in P01 Jumpo 2. This is the one that you guys come in on if you're using our Bastion system. He's on 9.6 Rocky. He's on 5.14. So Rocky, which mirrors very closely with Red Hat, is still back on 5.14. I have a box here, one of my older boxes. This is no longer our jump server. This is just my jump server. This is, look at this guy. This guy's old. I know. Some of you are about to laugh at me. He's sent to us 7.9. I love him, but I can't let him go. He's back on kernel 3.10, right? And there's probably a significant amount of vulnerabilities known about for this version of the kernel. Now he's not able to be connected to anymore, and he's out of rotation and all that kind of stuff. So he's just internal to my lab. He's my own little vulnerability box. I love him too much to get rid of him. I've had that box for over 10 years now and just updated over the years and stuff. But P01 Jumpo 2 is now the one that you guys that come in through the Bastion nodes. You guys come in there. Hayes, do I have well, I have Ranger, but Ranger passed away in July, so I don't have pets anymore. The wife might want cats one day, but I don't know. I've never had a cat. I've only ever had dogs. So, all right. Anyway, so let's keep going on this. So, gosh, there's so much stuff about kernels and stuff. If you guys want to go search the databases, you can. Here's the database information for NIST, and that's where everything kind of goes. You know, this is where all the stuff is. And again, you can format API calls against this. You can pull this information down. You can do, if you wanted to do your own vulnerability assessments against like Windows, Linux, there's all kinds of tags that you can use. They've got vulnerability metrics that are published, but could you pull your own and generate like, you know, vulnerability assessments? Yes, you can do all kinds of stuff. There's data feeds from this that people publish. Here's the APIs if you want to call them. Again, you can query this. I want to say it's 10 times a minute, so it's every 6 seconds before you get rate throttled. This is yeah. I always think I'm gonna start doing something with that, and then I never go finish it. So like, I just tell you guys about it. There. Oh, servers as pets versus cattle. Yeah, yeah. Ranger was really great. I do love that dog Ranger. But pets versus cattle is an interesting methodology. I do have that one pet of a server for sure. So let's go look at our kernel. So here's our kernel. And again, most of us want uname -r because that's really the information that's useful. Um, yeah, Rangers definitely passed on to wherever dogs go for sure. Let me show you guys this. So we can go look at the kernel, and when I did ls, and then I look in the boot location of our system, where does our system find its kernel? This comes from if you're in booting with Grub. There's other ways we can boot, but if we're booting with Grub, which is a Grand Unified Bootloader, and you're typically booting with Grub 2 nowadays, which is ls in here. Yeah, so we're Grub, cd to Grub, and then in here, we're still using Grub. Grub is going to look in /boot typically, if that's where it's going, and it's going to have these kernels, and the kernels are named VM Linux. Why they use Linux instead of Linux, I don't know. There's probably some old reason for it. But here's the name of the kernel right here. And here's the init RAM image. So this is what we call init RAM. And this is when the kernel first starts up, it loads up the init RAM FS before it does a switch root to the actual and mounts the root file system and all those things, right? We're not going over full booting right now, but understanding full booting, if you want to get into systems engineering and building Linux, very important. And I tell you guys, it's probably one of the things that I've built most of my career on is like building servers for teams and for. I always kind of fall into like the server build role because nobody else wants it, and I tend to be pretty okay at it. At least my stuff runs is the point. But here's the version of the kernel, and then we could do that ls again and see those ones. But if we were to do a -l on this, which is a long listing, it would give us, move this over just a little bit here, like that right there. It would give us, in the long listing, that only one of these is really there. This one right here exists. This is actually just a link. It's a soft link. I see right here. That's a link back to this one. And this other one, boot vmlinux.old, is also just a link back to that one. So there's one that actually exists, and there are two soft links to it. Now, we're not going to get too much into hard and soft links, but if you want to know the difference between a hard and a soft link, there's two major ones that I think of. One is when you have a hard link to a file, it is a direct inode connection within that file system to that file. So hard links can never span file systems. It just doesn't work like that. It would be like if you had a card catalog for a library book, but then it pointed to a different library. That wouldn't make any sense, one. Two, when you use hard links, you are going to increment the number of hard links right here. Whereas the soft links, see how they're all one right here? Let's make a hard link to this file real quick. So this is boot VM Linux, whatever. And let's just ln from this. Oh, well, there. I'll just. Right? To, Scott example. We're just making a file up, right? And then now when I do an ls-l in boot for VM, we're not going to see that other one, right? But now look at this. Look at this weird thing that just happened. Boot VM Linux right here used to only have one, but now he's got two hard links to him. He's got another pointer to him. In fact, some of you guys probably know this, but I'm going to say it for people that maybe don't know it. Linux, when you delete all the file, when you do an rm-rf on a file, you don't delete the file. You just delete that hard link inode pointer to it. So if I were to rm-rf this file right now, and there was only one link to it, it would just kind of go float off, and it would just be sitting out there on disk still, but this file system would have no way to access it ever again. The only way to get that back would then be with like a recovery tool, or if you had a specialized tool that would go and find that and relink it. Typically, though, you're not going to be able to do that with normal file systems. But if I have this other hard link to it, and I delete it, and I deleted this, there would still be a way to get it back because there's still a connection to it. So strictly speaking, rm-rf, against a file, like removing a file, -rf doesn't really need to be there, but just removing a file, rm, is really just removing the pointer location to it. And as long as you have another pointer to it, which I do now, which is a Scott example, we could still get the file back. We still got another connection to it without some kind of, there's tools that'll do it, and you can write your own stuff if you want. It's still sitting on the same exact location in memory or on the block device, but you've just destroyed the pointer to it. Okay. So by the way, to go forward in this lab, you have to echo in that there's only one actual kernel, and that's true. And then we can go look at dpackage-l. Dpackage by itself, so let's do dpackage-l by itself. That will tell us that there's all of these packages on the system. There's the name and the version. And we could go like this for a long time, or we can just let the system count it up for us, or we can do NL if we wanted, and it'll just tell us that there's about 815. But there's about 5 header lines to it. So if I did this, there's about 5 lines at the top here that are just like BS. So there's really about 810 packages on this system, right? But 815 would be close enough for government work, right? So then we were talking about up here, like your security team wants to know something about your system. Your security team's maybe done an audit. They've got some tool like Qualys or Tenable that's scanning all your stuff for vulnerabilities that are coming from that vulnerability database typically. Could you write something and do that yourself? Absolutely. Do you have time for that kind of stuff? It's this thing like, I have a buddy who he's an architect, does like Google Analytics architect type work. And people always ask him, well, hey, could you do this other like data analytics stuff for me? And he's like, well, I could, but that might not be an optimal use of my time. And he tells people that often because it's like, it's the same thing with Linux. Like once you do Linux, they're going to pull you in on troubleshooting everything because that's what they want us around for, guys. They keep us around for the troubleshooting skills that we have. So they pull us into all this other stuff. It's not always an optimal use of our time. It's the same thing with that. Could you do it? Probably. But I mean, is that really a good way to use our time? Not really. Anyways, they're going to come to you. They're going to say, hey, can you go check a whole bunch of servers and give me back the version of SSH on all of them? Yep. Right here. Here's all the versions of maybe, typically we'd be looking for like the SSH client and the SSH server. We probably aren't running SFTP, but maybe on some of our data mover nodes, we might have SFTP active, and maybe there's a version error, or maybe there's a known vulnerability here that even when you disable the default account, it's still saved in memory or something like that. I don't know. There's guys, the people that go and find vulnerabilities, and that's a valid job to go get into, the security researchers for that kind of stuff, they just like poke at the weirdest shit and find the weirdest stuff. And our job tends to be just move forward off of that stuff. Unless you want to be in the, driving and recompiling your OpenSSH and that kind of stuff. But you're typically not going to do that in enterprise support. In enterprise support, it's much more about keeping this whole fleet of servers moving forward. I tell people often, this is another thing about engineering that maybe people don't like to hear. We do all the fun stuff and cool, like I have all this cool stuff in my home lab that we can dick around with, right? Like where's all my stuff here, right? I got all this cool stuff here. What's going on here, right? Like I got I got to build my Proxmox environment back out, right? I have all this stuff I have to do. There's all this like stuff that we have going on, but I don't get to do any of that cool stuff in a corporate environment often. I'm typically just keeping all the servers running, making sure that new builds of servers work correctly, and eliminating errors by putting guardrails around stuff that users and devs can do. It's almost like thinking, I saw this one time. So everybody here knows what Blizzard is, right? Blizzard's this big company that used to run World of Warcraft. And I remember one time I was looking for jobs. This was 20 years ago. And I remember looking for jobs, and World of Warcraft was out back then. And I was looking for jobs, just clicking around, and there was like, networking engineer over at Blizzard. And I was looking at some of the other stuff, and I remember they had like a graphics artist, right? And I'm not a graphics guy. That's not what I want to do. I'm colorblind even, right? This is the best I can do. Black terminal with green or white letters. Um, but anyways, in this graphic artist thing, I remember in the job description, I clicked on it, just mess around, and I was like looking at the job description. And one of the things it said it specifically said this, guys. It was all this stuff about like tools you need and stuff, and then it said we don't need like I forget the exact wording, but the gist of it was we don't need a perfectionist. We need somebody who can pump out production art. And what that means is like, if your job is to like build like the generic textures of like armor or something, you don't have to make it perfect. You just have to get a lot of that out, right? You have to do the work and like you're like a production line of that stuff. And I feel like that's the same thing with Linux. Like everybody thinks like, oh, I'm going to go do all this cool stuff in Linux. Guys, I very rarely get to spin servers all the way up to full speed. I get to do that when I'm building like high performance compute stuff only at the beginning of it. Later on after that, I'm just benchmarking and keeping everything level. In fact, we were talking about it today, one of this project that we're on, and one of the other engineers, he said, it was like a group meeting for my company Redline, and we have all these people in all these different projects. And one of the guys on my project, he was like, the manager said, "Hey, what are you guys working on over there on that project?" And he goes, just keeping it all running. Nothing interesting going on. Nothing. We've got upgrades coming, but nothing really interesting. Like we're on the, and there's a a whole technology you guys all seen the technology adoption curve? There's like a million of these, but the technology adoption curve typically looks something like this. Let's see if that'll never look right. Probably gotta go click on their actual page. But you got innovation up here. And yeah, maybe look, some of you guys may be in innovation, and some of you guys may even be early adopters. Like you're working for like you're working on AWS projects, and you're doing like AWS or Azure for like a startup or something like that. Some of you may be early adopters of a lot of stuff, but there's a lot of work back here, guys. There's a lot of work in maybe maintaining a fleet. I actually know quite a few people who still maintain back to like RHEL 6 servers. RHEL 5, most everybody I know has finally gotten off of them, but RHEL 6, 7, 8, 9, and you go, man, RHEL 6, when did that come out? I don't know, like 13 years ago. We can go look it up, but RHEL 6 is out of primary support, so it's over 10 years old, right? Like, I mean, there's teenagers that are younger than some of these things, is my point, where like there's a lot of work back here that's honest, good work. It'll pay you a good check. It'll do all these things. And then you got to run your own stuff for the fun stuff. Like Hayes does all this stuff with like beats and music and stuff. You can do all of these things in your own home lab that are fun for you, but you're not going to probably be doing that in your career if you're on one of these. Like, you're using these old tools and you're just getting harassed by your security team to move up to newer versions of stuff. When I worked a lot in insurance, and I've worked in a lot of different areas, but insurance was definitely like very risk averse. Do not move to the newest version of crap. Rocky 10 or RHEL 10 is out. They're not going to be on RHEL 10 for 2 or 3 years in some of those older companies that I work in. In fact, one of my brothers still works at them for one of the insurance companies. They're major. They're way back. They're going to let all that. They won't be on Rocky or RHEL 10. They won't be on RHEL 10 until it's like on at least probably version 10.5 or something. They're really risk averse. Hold on real quick. The wife's texted me. Let me see if she'll get me. She might pick me up some food. Anyways, all right. I don't know. I'm talking a lot about other stuff because I'm trying to like let you guys know that you can do this stuff, right? Like there's a lot of there's a lot of room in the field still. I know a lot of people think, oh, AI is going to take this all over. I don't know, man. I don't see that much. I see in like I work in a lot of like highly scientific environments with weather, and in fact, anything you've ever seen weather forecast has come through the systems that I run for the government, right? All the weather forecasting comes from my particular program in NOAA. But it's like I work with all these guys that do all this highly scientific stuff, And where was I going with that? There's a lot of space for this. There's a lot of stuff to come in, but honestly, we do a lot of kind of just, I don't want to call it benign. I don't think that's a great term for it, but we do a lot of very, what would be a good term for that? Basic, just keep the systems running, keep everything going. Are we running Vax? No, I'm not running Vax. I don't know what that is. What is Vax? Keep the lights on, yeah. I even have a little drawing of that, right? Where I show you guys when you get in your career, often you will start. Where's that at? I know it's somewhere in one of my recent ones. Linux Systems Administration. This is like my little talk on Linux Systems Administration. This is up in the Discord somewhere too, I think. But let me pull this up. We've talked about that. Oops. We've talked about this over the years. This is a little drawing that I use for kind of looking at what the work kind of looks like. If you guys have never seen, if you're ever like, well, what's the work kind of look like? What do we do as admins? This comes from, so the PPDIOO methodology, if you guys have never seen it, is the prepare, plan, prepare, plan, design, implement, operate, and optimize. This is like a methodology that Cisco defines. It's their proprietary methodology, I think. But typically, a lot of times as sysadmins, you're going to start over here in the operating and optimizing. In fact, I was talking to my college students earlier today, and we were talking subnetting, and I was showing them variable length and fixed length subnet masks and the ways that we carve up networks. Right? I'll show you guys that if you want, but I have a generic talk on it that's not related to my college. Obviously, I can't show you my college stuff, but all my stuff that's generic outside of there, I can show you. But if anybody's interested in that, for sure. But as admins, sysadmins, and with what I was telling my students is, you're rarely going to just be hired as an architect out of college. You're probably going to be dropped into a network that's already running. Somebody's already designed it. Somebody's already carved up your networks. You're going to see a /28 and go, what the hell's a /28? I don't know what that is, right? And you're going to have to figure it out. But in the systems world, it's the same way. You're probably going to get dropped in, and the manager's going to go like this and be happy that he got himself a new Linux admin, and you're going to have a few hundred servers you maintain, or a few thousand, or whatever it is. If it's a few thousand, you'll probably have some other people on your team. But my point in telling you guys this is you're probably going to be over here KTLO, keeping the lights on. Network operations, security operations, help desk. Maybe you land yourself on a Linux admin team if it's a big enough company. But then I tell you guys, like, if you wanna move up from that, how do you optimize that system? You're running a system. You've got documentation that's always aging. Or do you start? One of the things I tell people, start by starting just updating documentation. Carve comp. It's not networks field. Yeah. We don't lean too heavily into, like, I don't do really a whole lot around here with like Halloween, but we did give out full-size candy bars this year, me and the wife. Although, here's the thing, I keep track of how many people we have in our neighborhood. Like when we do Halloween, I have like charts in my neighborhood for like how many kids have come by each hour, because I'm an engineer and a nut. And just like how much we've given out. I've never given out more than 57 candy bars before. So I thought full-size candy bars, 57, were going to be good. Me and the wife had over 200 people this Halloween come through, because the next street over, we didn't know this. We live in a pretty okay neighborhood, pretty nice. The next street over had like a block party, guys, and we were getting the runoff from people that were going through over there. And when we were done for the night, when we finally ran out of candy, the wife went and got more candy in the night. When she came back, we closed down shop, I think around 8 or 8:30. We walked over there. There was easily over 500 people out there. They had filled up. We got a school behind my neighborhood. They had filled up the parking lot for the school, so like a whole school day of kids, and they were just in this. They were just completely. There was no traffic going up and down that street. I was like, oh my gosh, and we got the runoff of that, and we had over 200 people come through. So we ran out of all our. I had like 80 full-size candy bars, and then a bunch of like cookies and stuff for the kids, and like they blew over the top. I don't even really like celebrate Halloween, but like I'm gonna give out candy because I'm not a monster. But anyways, all right, back to admin stuff. How do you optimize things? How do you make things better? And Hayes got me off on some other thing, but yeah, keep the lights on. Big part of, you're there's two places I found myself in administration and engineering, and I'll just explain it to you guys like this. There's two kinds of roles you might fall into, and I've done both of them. I'm currently in the one that I prefer, but some of you are gonna like it different ways. If you're a keep the lights on operations for like where my brother is back over at the insurance company and the one that I used to work at that insurance company, you are a cost center. You cost the company money. When they think about you, they're like, tech's over there costing us money. If everything's working, they don't ever think anything of you. But then when something goes wrong, they're just like, those guys. That's okay. That's an okay place to be. Every company's got that. Every company's got a cost center like that. But what I prefer, and this is a role that I really try to tell people to find if you can, where I am the person making the money, right? Like I'm an engineer for my company. I'm given out to, not given out, they charge them a whole bunch of money. My time is sold to people and I make my company money. And I just think about that for a second. Between those two roles, who do you think gets treated better in the company? The person that makes the company money or the person that's like a cost center? Well, they both need to exist for most companies, but like in the insurance sense, you're basically like the stepchild. You get treated terrible, like you're like Cinderella. How's it going, Yadev? How's it going over there on the YouTube side of things? I'm just talking about getting the job and that kind of stuff, and we're just kind of hanging out. The wife's coming home right now, so I only have a little bit more time before I got to drop off of here. But the goal then is, you get in, your operating systems, and if you're working the knock in the third shift, you could just put your feet up at night. You could probably spend a lot of time reading web comics and organizing your scrapbook collection and stuff. But if you focus on optimizing and doing things better, you will probably eventually move over into these type of roles where engineers probably spend about 80% of their time over here. Admins probably spend about 100% of their time over here. I think engineers probably spend about 20% of time troubleshooting and working on that kind of stuff. So much KTLO interferes with projects where you get to learn engineer stuff. I love doing. I hope yeah. And this, one of the things about this too is that's a good point. The more you spend fighting fires over here, and sometimes guys, I've been in roles like this too, where I should be over here as an engineer doing cool stuff, but I get pulled back 40, 50, 60% of my time to keeping stuff running. One of my roles, in fact, with that insurance company, I was the platform engineering lead. So I was the lead for all of the Linux and all the Windows, about 5,000 5,000 servers. No, we didn't do any workstations. That was a different team, but we did all the servers. And I did a lot of stuff over here, but I was very in the weeds with like how we were solving stuff and bringing stuff back. I had a team of about 9 people. Six were on the Linux side and 3 were on the Windows side. But I'm not the manager, guys. I told you I'm never the manager. I'm the tech lead, but I won't be a manager. Actually, I did put in, it's funny, I put in for the manager one time, and then I got hired on as the tech lead. That was when I went to the red team for a little bit. Yadev said, can I tell why XCP-NG is a better choice than Proxmox? I don't think it necessarily is. XCP-NG works for me for kind of my home lab environment, but I have moved, for some of you guys that have been around, those are my 4 physical servers here. I have moved over to I run a Proxmox environment now as well. So this box is pretty beefy for you guys that haven't seen it. It's 512 gigs of RAM and about 80 CPUs that it sees. I'm not really doing anything much with it yet. I built it earlier last month or earlier. Yeah, I need to build something with it. I just haven't done anything on it yet. So I'm getting back into it. I hadn't streamed for like about a week and a half. I was kind of being lazy and just kind of watching all the old X-Files and stuff, but now we're getting back into it. Is it remote management? I can do remote management on both of these. So this is like an out-of-band management here, and then this is my out-of-band management here. But I can connect to any of my servers through this, right? So my jump box here, right? So this is my There's my jump box here, and then I can jump into, like, I think I called it host box 2. Is that right? I think I can jump over into, here's host box 2, and then I can say, you know, what is this box? He's, yeah, so I built him 26 days ago. He's got a pretty good amount of space in his normal route, and then he is both my NFS and Samba in my environment. So some of you guys just exports. And then one of my favorite commands, test parm for Samba. He runs ISOs and ROMs and data. Data is a network share, so this is one of the things I tell you guys, like in my home lab environment, I like to keep things seamless. Like I can integrate things directly between stuff. So this is, you know, I'm on a Windows workstation, and here I can go directly down here into my data share on that host box, and here's all my stuff right here. So right here, here's all of, these are a bunch of jiu-jitsu videos basically, and then also backup stuff of my home lab, or my home environment is all here in backup, right? So a bunch of just home stuff or whatever. So and then I can seamlessly integrate like my whole lab environment. Some of you guys have seen I download ISOs and I throw them directly up there, and then they immediately get pushed across excuse me, into any of my other environments. So all right. But yeah, like these different things, we were talking about vulnerability management and the CVSS scores earlier with NIST. Yeah, Hayes, I do have 5 servers in there, but I'm slowly pulling the older servers out, and I am moving kind of from my XCPNG mostly environment down into my other environment. Any NVLink or regular PCIe GPUs? I'm not running any GPUs, unfortunately. I do want to get. So the wife and I talked earlier this year when they announced that digits thing from NVIDIA. I told her, I was like, I'm going to spend like $3,500, but it'll be for my home lab, and we'll all be able to use the GPUs on this thing because it's got all this horsepower, right? You guys seen that little digits box by NVIDIA? And we were going to do all this stuff, and I told her, I was like, I'm going to do, and then they just have, I don't think they've even put it out yet. Like, I'm pretty sure it's not out yet. So I am eventually going to connect one of those in, and then we'll have some GPU processing and stuff. I don't know, just for, I don't know, research stuff or whatever we want to do. But yeah, I have more power than I have things that I need to do right now. But we do have the lab up, right? So people that know about the Professional Linux Users Group lab environment, you guys can get in there. You go into our Discord, and then you drop down into lab environment. And I think you ask it's up here and pinned, but like you tell the bot that you want to drop your key, and you put the public version of your SSH key in there, and it'll drop it in there, and then you connect into our lab environment. You get into our Bastion environment and all that stuff. These guys. Anyways, yeah, there's all kinds of stuff going on in Discord. Discord's free, and vaporware. Yeah, we got a lot of stuff going on in the environment. And I might be giving this talk that I had originally done for you guys, which is Werewolf fits into high performance compute. Werewolf's a particular tool from CIQ, same guys that run Rocky Linux and Werewolf and a bunch of other tools. And I did talk with them. Well, I did talk with you guys first, and then I did talk with my company, and then I did talk with them in the Werewolf user group. And I might do this talk at, I'll do an updated version of it, but at the Scale Expo this next year. So, Zorgle Network Chuck had a video on beta version of the box. Oh, I don't even know what that is. Yeah. Okay. But guys, yeah, this was me kind of coming back. I haven't streamed in like a week and a half because I'm telling you, I set it all up multiple times, and I just was like, I don't want to do it. But I'm getting some energy back in me. On the beta version of that box. Okay, nice. Zorgle, yeah, we'll figure it out. If I do put anything out there, we'll do it with that. And then Home Lab for tax write-off. I didn't even think about that. I probably should do something like that. I never even thought about that. Like rent out that whole room because I have it in the other room. And some of you guys remember when I first moved, so I moved my office to this other room of my house, and then all my other stuff was in the other room. And I was doing one of our Linux admin courses. I think it was the second time I ran through it, and I was talking and this and this and this, and then I just heard it go quiet in the other room, and I was like in a lab environment showing something, and I was like, "Did you?" I yelled at my wife. I was like, "Did you just unplug something in there?" And she goes, "I think I unplugged all your servers. Did you guys notice?" I'm like, I have 60. I think I had like 80. Oh my gosh, my wife. Oh, she's great. But all right, so we'll call this. This will be our. I was coming back to stream a little bit and playing Brovideo. Yeah, Brotato. Brotato is one of my favorite games. But yeah, we'll get back to it. I'll be on here pretty regularly. I'm going to be doing on the weekends. We'll get back into the normal cadence. We're doing Unit 7 this week of the 2 courses. So for people that are doing the courses with us, we're going to... Wait a minute. Did we do Unit 7 already? Hold on. I need to look. But yeah, we'll get back into doing stuff. We will have... those are all free, by the way, down in the Discord. You just got to go find them. But I will be doing more of my research stuff because I am greatly behind now on my dissertation for all kinds of other reasons of me messing around too much. So dissertation will be taking a lot more on the weekends, like front seat type stuff, and maybe I'll do some like co-working Pomodoro stuff and just answer questions while I'm working on other stuff. But my systems engineering PhD is, I got a year still, but I don't want to wait that long. I think I can write the dissertation much faster, but I got to get this next part done so that I can start doing the research. Because you can't collect, if you guys don't know, you can't collect any research data for a dissertation until you've passed typically like an internal review board and that kind of stuff. So that's my next thing that's due by the end of this year. So we'll get it all going though, but we'll get it all working and stuff. So yeah. No, it's good to see you again, Yadav, and all this stuff, and I will see most of you guys later on. I'm not going to go ahead and raid out anywhere. We won't worry about that kind of stuff right now, but I definitely appreciate everybody coming.